Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives.
Welcome back to FitBody Lifestyle, and we've got another episode here for you today. And today we're going to be talking about the reasons for the seasons.
And if you're wondering what we mean by reasons for the seasons, we're talking really more about the fact that bodybuilding is a lifestyle, and in order to make that lifestyle sustainable, you've got to be able to master the first four letters of lifestyle. Life is going to happen, and it does, whether you are in prep, and we see this all the time. It does happen in prep a lot. It can happen during your improvement season, and it can be a trigger for you or a threshold for you to then go into an improvement season because other things may be happening in your life. For example, maybe you want to have a child. Maybe you have a job change. Maybe you're starting school. Maybe, a number of different things happen. So let's kind of talk about the two general types of season in bodybuilding.
In bodybuilding specifically. Yeah. So we're going to talk about the improvement season versus the prep season.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're both really important. And I think that really the more challenging one in some ways can be the improvement season.
I think it's not in some ways. I think in every way.
Well, I think in some ways. I mean, I think there's, I know we're going to kind of dive into different aspects of both of the seasons. Kind of just starting from when we're on prep, there's like a switch that slipped. A lot of times, if we know we're going into prep, we're going to make some adjustments to what's going on in our lives. Maybe we're going to take some things off of our plate. We're going to lessen our commitments that we're making, whether it be work commitments, personal commitments, things like that. We're going to make space. I mean, in order to be successful in a prep, you have to make space for it because it's going to take a lot of time. You're going to be adding in a lot of cardio. There's going to be other things that are going to be time consuming. So I feel like because there's kind of that switch that flips and there's some preparation that takes place and you dive in and you're super focused during that time, a lot of people find that easier just from the perspective of you're executing every day. There's a lot of clarity around what needs to get done, why it needs to get done. There's an end date, which also I think makes it easier just knowing that there's a date and I need to be ready by this date and, that kind of thing. So I do think a lot of people do better mentally with that kind of more finite, restrictive time frame, even though it's more difficult from the perspective of, it's a big commitment. You have to make sure you're, there's not as much flexibility on the food. There's more time, a lot of times in the gym, maybe more cardio, maybe more steps, so there are, some additional requirements for time and energy and effort that go into that. And at the same time, again, because it's a finite period of time, a lot of people find that a little bit easier.
I think it's the difference between working with a deadline and working without a deadline. And the analogy I would give is that, so in the Army, I would have schools that I would go to, and I much preferred those schools because they were a finite school, 2, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it was, with a test at the end, and it was finite and it was determinative. I mean, I had a set schedule. Versus there was another portion of learning that I went through, which was correspondence course, and that was self-paced study. And man, I struggled with that. I struggled with that so hard because it's all on me, and I have to set my own schedule. And it's very easy when you're setting your own schedule to get off mark or off target because there's no deadline pending. If it was tied to a specific, gate that I had to get through or a specific event that I had to get through, I would do better with it knowing that I had a timeline. But if there's no timeline, and improvement season can often be a no timeline thing, where it can be self-paced and you do have to trust in the work that you're putting in. And we have several philosophies around that, which is champions are made during their improvement season. They're not made during prep. Once you get to prep, it's done. The growth is done. The growth is, that's pretty much over. I'm not saying you can't grow in prep, you can, but it's just less advantageous because you're not creating the conditions for that growth like you are during improvement season. So but it's hard. It's hard to get your mind on straight to work without a deadline or work without a specific goal. The goal is to grow, but the growth is not always going to be, and usually is not going to be, visible week to week, day to day.
Well, and I do think that another important aspect of the improvement season is creating enough flexibility. So you kind of have people, I feel like, that are two ends of the spectrum. You have the people that tend to kind of throw caution to the wind, maybe procrastinate, they're not getting their workouts in, they're kind of not really paying too much attention to their nutrition. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's time to prep again. Oops. I didn't really do anything. I didn't, and what you said is absolutely true. Like it is you're not going to grow a lot in a deficit. So once you're in prep, you're in a deficit. So you've kind of missed the mark a little bit if you're one of those people that kind of just throw caution to the wind and, just do what you've done. But I do see people that are at the other end of the spectrum that don't build in enough flexibility. And then by the time they get back time to do prep again, they burn themselves out because they've been so strict on the other end of things. So I do think, and I know we've talked about balance in other episodes, that looks different for each person, figuring out like what's going to give you enough flexibility to really feel refreshed and feel like, you've been able to, enjoy the things that maybe you didn't get to do as much of while you were on prep. I mean, that might include going on a vacation, spending more time with family, enjoying some of your favorite restaurants. I do think that, we have to build in those life things as well. So, you don't want to go to one extreme where, you're not making the progress that you need to make, because what you said is absolutely true. Like people that really focus on making those improvements during that off season are going to be the ones that come back and really kill it when they step back on stage. But again, there's that other side. There are the flip sides. I mean, I have those people that don't want to gain a pound, that's not good either, so, the opposite end of that spectrum is just as detrimental.
And that mental aspect, which is, I know something that you bridged into a little bit with that. I think it's very difficult. As an athlete, you are looking at your time on stage, and when you think about your years, 365 days out of the year, your show is 365th of that year, and the time on stage is even less than that. So when you think of, whatever it is, 1% of your year, to whatever, I'm not good at the math right now, but it's such a small percentage, but mentally, psychologically, you are fixated, you are anchored to that vision of you on stage. That is what you see. And so every time you see yourself different from how you saw yourself on stage, becomes that cognitive dissonance where, like, how do I deal with this? That's how I want to look, but at the same time, that's not how you need to look in order to progress, in order to grow. That is your contest show. That is one day, and really less than one day when you think about the time you're on stage, but you anchor to that. And it's very easy to get fixated on that, and then that become the marker for your success or failure throughout your improvement season.
Yeah, I agree. The two words that come to mind, for a successful improvement season are discipline and structure. And when I say structure, I do feel like that needs to within that structure needs to be built in unstructured time, unstructured eating, things like that, and again, that works so differently for each person. I find that some people need for a free day once a week, or a free meal 2 or 3 times a week, or some people can eat intuitively, for a good portion of their improvement season and do a great job. That's perfectly fine too. It really depends on the individual. And so I think, being really honest with yourself, and you can even give different techniques a try. I know we don't love the word try, but you can do different things and then see, oh, okay, when I went totally intuitive, I got a little too flexible with it. I started gaining more than I was comfortable with. Maybe I do want to track at least, 5 days a week. Or whatever that happens to look like for you. I have a lot of people that will track throughout their entire improvement season, but we'll just do flex calories. So then they have a certain allotment they can use, so that way they're out with friends and family and they're going to stop for an ice cream cone. Okay, that's part of my flex calories, that's okay. It's just important, I think, that whatever that level of flexibility that feels right, that, reinvigorates the soul and the mind and the body and makes you, feel like you're enjoying life. What we don't want to get into is a situation where you feel so pigeonholed and so restricted that it stops being fun.
Right.
Like I think that what's really important, to us, whether you're on season or off season, is that we're really creating a lifestyle that's sustainable, that's based on being healthy, being fit, and enjoying the process. It's not, every piece isn't going to be fun. Every day is not going to be fun, but that's life. But it shouldn't be something that becomes so restrictive that, that it becomes to the point where you don't want to do it anymore.
Right. If you can't find something fun about, and fun is a core value for FitBody Fusion, and fun should be, and I highly recommend that fun be a core value for you as an individual. And we see this a lot where just that, I know I'm going to go back to something you said where in what we see, you said the two primary elements that make for a successful improvement season are discipline and structure. I noticed that you did not include motivation in there. And I do think we see that come up a lot where people say, I'm just not motivated. I'm not motivated. And I mean, I don't, that's a difficult one to deal with because look, when you have a job, I'm not always motivated to get up and go to my job every day. I'm not always motivated to do the things that I need to do to take care of myself. I'm not motivated to do my responsibilities, my commitment. So what takes me through those things when I'm not motivated is discipline and structure and knowing that, look, I have a system that I have got to fulfill. And maybe this is a good time to plug James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which I highly recommend for athletes because it really does focus on your systems, not on your outcomes. If you build a successful system, then your outcomes will be produced. And if your outcomes that you want are not produced, there's probably a problem with your system or your process or your habits. These words are somewhat interchangeable for you, or for me at least. You've got to really focus, and we talk about this a lot, about falling in love with the process. But that begs the question, how do you fall in love with the process?
Right. Well, first of all, you got to create a process that's
go.
reasonable and sustainable
For you.
Yeah, and it is. And I always like when I talk about the discipline versus motivation conversation. The thing I always like to talk about is like, am I so motivated every morning to go brush my teeth? Like, oh man, I can't wait to brush my teeth. In some ways, yes, it feels good. But the point is that.
But it feels good after you started.
But the point is, I would never not brush my teeth. That's not an option. So that's where it's really a discipline thing. Like it's not an option. It's something you do every day. You get up. This is part of your process. There's a reason behind the process. And I know we talk a lot about your why. Your processes should have a why. If there is a why there, even though you might not be motivated or the fire's not lit to do that particular thing, there's a reason you're doing it. It's in place for a reason. And so, it makes it a little easier to stay disciplined when you're doing whatever it is that particular item is throughout your day.
I have committed in my own personal life to doing at least 100 push-ups a day. And I don't do them all 100 at a time. I do them in sets of 30 or 40 or whatever even if it's 10. But I will tell you that first set's a struggle for me every time. Just getting, and I'm going to call it the motivation. It's really not the motivation to get to do it. It's really the discipline to get to do it. I have a system. I have a plan. When I do that first repetition, I automatically feel better when I do that first set. And that first set will always produce the second set and the third set and the fourth set if I need the fourth set. But the point is that it's not the outcome of whatever. I actually don't have an outcome for it. I just have I want to do 100 push-ups every day for my own general health. That's my goal, is my general health. And so knowing that first rep, if I just can get that first rep in, then everything else will follow. But and you think about during COVID, we wrestled with this a lot with people struggling with workouts and how they did it. I still have that vision of you swinging the laundry detergent around for your shoulders and making something work. But what made it work was not the working out. What made it work was the system, which is that you had put in place, which is I'm going to work out. I'm going to do something physical.
Yeah. And so I think during, figuring out, there's so many things that make space for in our lives. So figuring out how to create that discipline, those systems, and then also how to make sure we're also leaving space, whether it be again for there's a vacation, or maybe there's a surgery, or you're having to take care of a ill family member. Sometimes our systems that we put into place aren't going to work in particular situations. So, finding ways, and I love that you gave the example of during COVID, like obviously the gyms were closed. And so, for me, I set a step goal. I did more yoga. I found ways to get a little bit of resistance training in. So, being open-minded and, also giving yourself a little bit of leeway. I know like I'll have people that are going to Europe for the first time and they want to be able to, take in some of the local fare and enjoy some foods that might not be things they would typically eat. So, you can still do that and then create some parameters around that. I'm going to go and I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to make sure that I'm prioritizing my protein, that I'm stopping before I'm feeling like Thanksgiving turkey full. I'm going to take a bite of this. I'm going to enjoy a little bit of that. So, I do think that, it's really important to find ways to build in that flexibility, to be able to pivot, to be able to go and enjoy yourself and do these different things. I feel like that when people get pushed away from a fitness lifestyle is when it's so restrictive. And now during, specifically during prep, that's different. We are restrictive during that time. Again, like you talked about, that's like you're taking a course or you're doing something. It's a finite timeline. It's we're buckling down for this period of time. For the rest of the year, it really needs to be what we're talking about where, what's the priority? If my priority is, in terms of my fitness goals is putting on muscle, well, then I'm going to be able to reverse down, a lot of that cardio. Maybe I just do a step goal to get a little bit of movement in, and then I free up some time and some space for some of these other things that maybe I put on hold during that time I was competing. And I do think that's really important. Otherwise, we start to lose the big picture.
Well, as we talked about in our fusion hack about mental state being so important, if you compromise your mental state because you are so rigid, and the analogy that I give, and I think we've given this before, but it's the more rigid you are, the more narrow the path that you must walk. So imagine yourself on a tightrope where you have just created this such a rigid approach to things that you are literally on a tightrope. And yeah, you can balance yourself on a tightrope, but your margin for error is very small. Versus if you create a sidewalk. Sidewalk is still pretty narrow, but you can walk on a sidewalk and still go a little bit left and a little bit right and still stay on your path. And sidewalks, the beauty of sidewalks, tightropes are very straight. Sidewalks are able to meander based on the road and the environment. And I think about this metaphor a lot because that's how life is. No matter how much you think you have it handled, life will reach up and slap you in the face with an unexpected event or something that you didn't plan for. God, we've had people with fires that, have decimated their houses. We've had people that have unexpected pregnancies. We've had people that have unexpected vacations. And these things are going to happen. When I say unexpected vacations, like they want a prize or something, and hey, they have to take the vacation, or they get to take the vacation,
surprised
or their
them.
spouse,
I've had that happen a lot.
Yeah, and I think the difference is look, if you're in prep, can you do that? Absolutely, you can do it. You can absolutely weave that in if you need to. And there's a way to do it that's successful and a way to do it that's not. And the way to do it is that if you are so rigid going into that event that you're prioritizing your prep, that can often lead to a rebound effect or a decreased mental, compromising your mental state, your outlook on things because you're so rigid. Versus if you prioritize the event, the vacation, the wedding, the trip home, whatever it is, and then you plan around that rather than planning the event around your prep, I really think that that's the more successful strategy, because part of what you need to do is to be present in what you are doing. It's when you're checking the box, when you're detached, when you're disassociated from things, that's where you can get into trouble, because then there's really no pause between stimulus and response. There's a stimulus, something that happens, and then your response is just whatever it is, that without thinking, because you're not present in that moment. Giving yourself that ability to be present gives me the ability too to make a reasonable decision of, okay, I have the stimulus of I'm at an event. I'm at a family. I'm at a wedding. I'm at a wedding during my prep. Stimulus. Hey, there's cake here. Hey, it's my favorite cake. Hey, it's the cake that I've dreamt about all during prep. Response, well, I'm just not going to eat that. And then I sit there and think about the cake and think about the cake, think about the cake. And 2 weeks later, still in my prep, I just can't overcome the thought of that cake. And I deviate off my plan and have the cake. Okay. Versus, okay, stimulus, there's the cake. My response, where am I at on my macros? Okay, I'm creating that space. Hey, look, I have a few carbs left today. And instead of doing this food or that food, I can have a bite or 2 bites and still work that into my macros. And I don't know what you think about that.
No, I mean, one of the things that I thought about as you were talking, the tightrope analogy, I loved a lot because what kind of came to my mind and even my body as you're saying that is that anxiety of like, that constant feeling of like, if I move too much, I'm gonna fall, I'm gonna mess up, and I feel like that if we're living in that state constantly, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. It leads to depression. It can lead to, just being unhappy and just completely just throwing it all by the wayside. Because who wants to feel like that all the time?
And you may be successful in the short run on that philosophy, but it's the longer term that I do think where it manifests.
Right. It's exhausting over time. And it kind of rolls right into the other analogy you were just giving with the cake. It's like when we're constantly being so restrictive, there's a point. Like we don't have an unlimited amount of willpower. There's going to be a point where the dam breaks. And I've experienced this myself, from being overly restrictive. I can tend to be a very extreme person. And that's something I've been working on my whole life to find that, a little bit more balanced space where I can give room for other things. It doesn't have to always be so laser focused. So I do feel like, during these improvement seasons that we're talking about, this is the time to practice that. This is the time to find, what that looks like for you. So that you're able to weave in the things that matter in life. And there's we've talked about Rapport Leadership International and how much we really love all their courses, and they have a course called Life Mastery. And we're going to go back and do it again because it's been many years since we did it. But one of the first things they have you do is you kind of make this map of all the different aspects of your life that are important. The wheel, yeah. So friends and family, health, fitness, career. There's finances. Yes. So there's all these things. And so you're kind of plotting where you are on everything and looking for those areas of imbalance. And I do think it's important for us to check in with ourselves and kind of figure out, like, where are our priorities right now? Where are we putting all of our energy? And it's going to ebb and flow. There's certain times we're going to give more energy to one thing versus the other. The idea here is, though, to have, like we've talked about before, some of those processes and habits in place so that we're not completely losing sight of, any one particular area of our life or goal that we've got going on, whether that be our nutrition, our fitness, or, our time with friends and family and, our relationships and things like that, which, can take a hit sometimes during that more focused prep sort of part of our lives.
They absolutely can. And I do know some people, and I think, as an athlete, you have to be very selective about the noise that you create around you or the noise that you let in around you. So, if you know that, look, going to an event might compromise you, then I think you have to make that decision and recognize where you are at energetically. Hey, look, I'm exhausted. I don't have the willpower this week to resist certain temptations. So I'm not going to put myself in that situation. And, our favorite saying, which is the best way to avoid temptation is to avoid temptation. Don't put yourself in situations where you can be tempted if you know that, in particular, if you know that you might not be able to withstand that. So, and I think part of this, and you and I have talked a little bit about this before, is, or I don't know whether we've talked about it on the podcast or not, but scarcity versus abundance mindset. And when you're looking at things from a scarcity point of view, like what you don't have, that will fixate your mind on what you don't have instead of thinking about all the things that you do have. And that goes into decoupling food from fun. I can't. I mean, I can think of time when I broken bread with friends and loved ones, and when I say broken bread, I mean had a meal with them, and it's been eventful, but it was never ever about the food. It was always about the connection. It was about the people that I was with. It was about that, and so I didn't need the food to help me connect with other people. And I know that there are some food shamers out there that will, if you're bringing your Ziploc bag of food or your container of food, they will shame, like, why are you eating that? Why don't you have the food here? Well, listen, that's a choice. And putting yourself at that choice of, well, this is what I want to have is far different from saying this is what I have to have. When you say this is what I have to have, that's a scarcity mindset. When you say this is what I choose to have, that puts you in the power position. And when you're in the power position, psychologically, then you are at choice. When you are at choice, then you are empowered and you are charting your own destiny versus what you have to do. No, look, nobody's requiring that you get on stage. Nobody's requiring that you do this. This is your choice. So if it's your choice, then empower yourself to make those decisions that support that choice.
Yeah, as you're talking, I was thinking about a situation where I was in prep and there was a death in the family, and so I traveled back to Louisiana, and I was there for my family, and it was interesting because I didn't want to add the burden that I had of prepping for my show onto my loved ones that we were all grieving, and so I just was subtle about. I got everything done I needed to get done. Like, what you said, I did have my meals, and I know sometimes that bothers people. They want you to partake in
That's
whatever.
That's a them problem, not a you problem.
Right. But, I feel like that's something you can overcome. And I just didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't make a production about it. I just kind of was subtle with it. And then, I didn't really get to go to the gym while I was there. So I just would go outside and run around the cul-de-sac and, get my movement in and things like that. So I do feel that, where there's a will, there's a way. It is very much the attitude you bring to it. I really love and live by the abundance mindset, and I can feel when I start getting into that scarcity sort of mindset. And that's where kind of coming in and looking at those things that I have to be grateful for, and realizing the cup is half full instead of half empty, and just kind of bringing back to that. And we all do that. We all have those moments of kind of going to that spot. And I think that it's an opportunity to practice, just keep practicing this mindset thing and how you're looking at things, because boy, do you make different decisions when you're looking at things from the perspective of there's enough versus there's not enough. I mean, I definitely see that a lot. I see that a lot with, athletes, and it's me against me. I get to do this. This is, I get to keep improving. I get to keep showing up. It's not about who I'm standing next to or, what other people are doing. Of course you can have other people inspire you and, encourage you and things like that. And at the end of the day, it's like kind of coming from that place of, positivity and enjoying the process.
And I think that's so important. What you said is that I think in this world, not just in this bodybuilding world, but in this world in general, everybody's looking for that hack for, hell, we have the fusion hacks, but I think in general, people are looking for that silver bullet. What's the thing that I can do to make the biggest difference? And self-help is great. And I'm a big advocate of that. And I'm also a bigger advocate of, you got to figure out what works for you. What works for me may not work for you. And I think, I always talk about that article that James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, wrote, where he talks about the 5 reasons why people make bad decisions. And I think it's called I can't remember which principle it was, but it's like where people will look at Michael Jordan and think, okay, Michael Jordan was the best basketball player that ever lived. Debatable, but in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, I know there's people saying, no, he's not out there, which is fine, my opinion. And they'll look at what he did or his practices or his behaviors, and they'll try to replicate that. And what you don't think about with that is there is a whole host of other people who've wanted to replicate that, but aren't Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan, and he did what he did, and it would work for him. And I think I spend sometimes too much time looking at what other people are doing and not enough time in looking at what are my strengths. How do I make this work? I love getting a tool from you, my wife, and you have great tools, but not all those tools will work for me. So I've got to figure out, and it's kind of like I'm going to drift into this topic of leadership, which is the first rule of leadership is show up. The second rule of leadership is be yourself. So as I'm thinking about my style and what works for me, I got to explore different avenues to think what will work for me. The inquiry is great, but the application needs to be authentic to me. I can't apply your system and expect that it's going to work for me. It might not. But as I'm going through this lifestyle and how do I be successful in the phases of my season, I've really got to figure out what works for me.
I love that. I think that what's important in each of these seasons that we're talking about is being intentional. Being intentional. I know you mentioned being present. We talk a lot about journaling. This is a great place to journal when you're shifting from one of the seasons to the other, sitting down and thinking about, what are my priorities during the season? Not just, from a fitness standpoint or from a competition standpoint, if you're a competitor, also from, professional standpoint, from a personal standpoint, like what are the things I want to accomplish during the season, and then start to allocate time and build processes around that. So kind of backing away from, the details and then kind of letting those details follow by getting really clear on what you're wanting to accomplish. Again, this is kind of what we started out talking about in the beginning. When we go into our competition season, that's gets a little simpler because, we're very focused during that period of time. And yes, we still have to integrate some of those other things. Our job is still there. Our kids are still there, so we do still have to, have that same approach, but it is a little less freewheeling. So, it's a little bit more finite and we know exactly what we're doing with each minute of the day. And it's very focused. Whereas I feel like that's, lost a little bit for a lot of people during, the improvement or off season. How am I building in even enough rest time, enough downtime? Like that's something to think about too. And I mean, I'm bad about this, it's like sometimes when I have a free minute or hour or day, I don't know what to do with myself because I have so much structure built in. So, it's something I have to work on too. But those are all aspects that we need to think about to, really truly be long-term successful and happy and, accomplish the things that we want out of life.
And I want to go back to that journaling concept that you just talked about, because as you think about the scarcity mindset, and in particular, I do think just taking out a pen and writing, I don't care whether it's on a Post-it note, back of a napkin, who cares? It really doesn't matter. There is strength and there is value in writing things down by hand. Whether you can read it or not, it's irrelevant. It's the act of taking the time to being present with yourself and writing something down that can make a difference in your day. And that gratitude list of just saying, I am grateful. I mean, at top of my list, I am grateful for my wife, Jamie. I mean, if I just start and finish my list there, I want to be in a better mindset just because I wrote that down and said that. So I think there's so much value and strength and power in that, in reshaping the have to do things into the get to do things. So as we talk about, these seasons of life, and these seasons of bodybuilding as they impact you, I think part of it, if I'm backing away from it for a minute, is that putting yourself at choice and really focusing on, and I know this is a little bit repetitive, but putting yourself at choice, making sure that this is something you get to do, and then building the process that works for you. Those are kind of the key elements that I'm thinking about as we talk about this.
And I'll add one element that came to my mind is that communicate.
Yeah.
Communicate. Once you come up with all the things that you've talked about, communicate it to your friends, communicate it to your family. If you're working with a coach in your improvement season, that's a great thing to communicate with them. And I love when I have an athlete that will tell me like, hey, during this improvement season, yes, I want to make sure that we're working on these different areas and, for me to come back and improve. And it's really important to me to have, these certain days where I can enjoy, time with my kids and not be restricted. Or, it's really important to me to be able to go on this trip that we've had planned and not track during that period of time. And then we'll come up with a plan together that still gives them a little bit of like guidance and structure, but allows them still to do what's important to them. So it doesn't have to be an all or none proposition. And, communicate so people around you know what you're looking to achieve, what your goals are, how they can best support you, because that's going to just help you stick to it, help with that momentum. Even just that verbalization of what you're wanting to accomplish can solidify it within yourself, just like the journaling does. I mean, writing things down, communicating it to others, all those things are going to help just ground you in, what you're wanting to accomplish.
I love that. And the communication piece, you can also weave in something else there, which is an accountability partner. If it were you and me, I mean, I would communicate a goal that I had for you or for myself. And I'd say, Jamie, I want you to hold me accountable to that. And that just simply means that, like if I'm not doing my 100 push-ups a day, Jamie's going to be saying, did you do your 100 push-ups today? But I verbalize that goal. So I then enlist her help in helping me be successful for a goal that I have. And we've done that as I'm sitting here thinking, and we talk about this, I think we can go back to that a little bit, huh, honey? Maybe.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I'm thinking to myself, I'm your accountability partner even when you don't want me to be.
But I truly do want you to be my accountability. Well, do I? Yeah. Not all the time, but yeah, I do. Yeah. You're always reminding me to take my supplements and drink my water, and I remind you to drink your water.
Yeah, you remind me. Yeah, you're sometimes my accountability partner when I don't want you to be too. But no, it's it's always coming from a good, loving place. It's like, sometimes we get off track and we don't want to be reminded. And that's, if somebody really cares about us, they're going to remind us even if we don't want to hear it.
Well, that's the point, I think, is when you communicate it, and I think a lot of people are afraid to communicate it. It's like New Year's resolutions, right? So New Year's resolutions, the science on this is, volumes long, but people that communicate a New Year's resolution are far more likely to accomplish that than the people who just keep it to themselves. And writing down your goal is going to make you far more likely to do that goal than it will be if you just keep it in your head. And then when you communicate that goal to somebody else and ask them, hey, look, I really want you to help me with this goal. I want you to hold me accountable. Be careful what you ask for. But if you really want to achieve that thing, that's going to help you get on the road to success for that thing. Yeah?
Good stuff.
Yeah, it is. And, I was just thinking about something else. So you talked about the death of your grandmother and dealing with that. And I know that was very difficult. And I remember you back there, and man, that was quite an event for you to do. And I do think that, you cannot plan for some of the unexpected things that happen in life. And there is a difference between having a planned vacation that you plan during your prep and having a death in the family or an illness or an accident that, incapacitates you for a period of time. These are things that will happen. They're not going to happen to every person. They're not going to happen in every prep or every improvement season, but these things are going to happen. And I mean, what do you tell people in those circumstances?
Well, I mean, you do the best you can. I mean, at the end of the day, and that's in that particular example for me, I just did the best I could, and it wasn't perfect. It was crunchy. I also reached out for help when I needed it, and it's tough because, especially in that particular situation, I didn't want to burden others. So as much as I can, I just kind of created and kept in my structure, kind of what we talked about, where I didn't have to think about it because I already had meals packed. I already had, just kind of kept everything, that structure in place, so that then, I could put the energy into the emotional side of things and, the supporting side of things and that kind of thing. But, life is going to throw us curveballs. And I think at the end of the day, we have to give ourselves grace and be kind to ourselves and, just realize we're doing the best we can and, keep moving forward.
And I think that may be the last element that we add to this beyond the communication, which is ask for help. We see this all the time about people just not wanting to burden others. And we'll see this in a check-in of somebody who's dealing with some major life event, but tells us after the fact, instead of just saying, hey, look, I'm dealing with this is there any guidance you can give me or help? And oftentimes it just helps you individually, helps me individually if I just express it. It releases that burden of, man, this isn't something I have to shoulder alone. I can talk to somebody about it. So as we talk about communication, ask for help. Ask for help, ask for buy-in, ask for support. If we talked about the thing of bringing your meals to a restaurant and how some people can food shame that. Well, they may food shame that because you haven't articulated why it's important to you. Hey, I'm bringing my food because I'm prepping for a show and I want to get on stage in the best condition I can be. And I want you all to be proud of me and I want to be proud of myself. I mean, if you're a family member and you're hearing that, how do you say, screw you? Or how do you say, no, eat this or eat that? How do you do that? I just don't think that people have that capacity. But again, it's part of this understanding of what's your why? And are you willing to invest others in your why? Because, as we say, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that's just kind of been a staple philosophy that we've had. But the more people you can get engaged in your why, the more successful you're going to be. It's not the why. I can't think as I sit here any why that is individual. And I'm a big believer that great accomplishments are not made by great individuals. They're made by great teams. Get people involved in your why.
And it's okay if not everybody's supportive. I know as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, this person. Not everybody's going to be supportive of anything you do in your life. And that's okay. So, as you kind of build that support structure, and we talk a lot about support structure around, lean on those people that are going to support you and be there for you, and add to that. Like we do a lot of team building things and opportunities for people to connect. And it's really cool to watch, people just find somebody they click with, and that maybe becomes their accountability partner or their person who's going to encourage them along the way when things get hard. And we just had an athlete fly all the way from New York to California to support one of the other athletes she had met on the team, like to be there for her. Like it was just amazing.
That filled my heart.
It really did, and it's like seeing things like that, like even if you don't have that kind of support within your family or your own, immediate people, there's opportunities in there to find and connect. So, that definitely can help you along the way.
So we have put out challenges to everybody before, and we're going to put out a challenge today, which is tell one person that's close to you, if you have not already done it, what your why is. Tell them why what you're doing is important to you. Let them into your heart and tell them why what you're doing is important to you. And I don't care whether you send somebody a text and say, hey, look, I'm John, I'm prepping for a show and I just want you to know why I'm doing that. I want you to understand what's in my heart because I feel like you can support my why and here's what it is. Trust those people that love you and support you to actually help you along your way. So as we talk about the phases of the seasons, right? The seasons of your life, and dealing with these unexpected occurrences and also setting yourself up for success. We've talked about some different things, communication, cluing people into your why, making sure that you put structure and discipline in place, fall in love with the process because the process is really what's going to take you there. Champions are made in the off season or the improvement season. Is there anything else I missed?
Give yourself grace.
Give yourself grace.
If things don't go exactly to plan, that's okay. Get right back on the horse.
That's right. It's one day. Fall down, as the samurais say, fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Build in enough flexibility, so that you're feeling, refreshed and balanced and, consistently be journaling and thinking about how, those areas of your life that you want to give a little bit more attention to and, live your life, love your life.
Transform your tightrope into your sidewalk and walk to the destination of your dreams. And I think we can end on that. Yeah.
I love it.
Okay. Everybody, like, comment, subscribe, leave your comments, and be good to yourself.
Be good to each other.
And be safe. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBody Fusion.